Okay, guys, this is our Unit 2 final exam review. This is for regular pre-calc. Before I start the front, if you take a look on the back, you'll notice I threw in a unit circle and reference angle chart. This doesn't really come into play a ton in Unit 2, but we had some extra space, and it's something I want to make sure you're practicing. So at some point, I am going to ask you to fill this out. Remember, these papers are going to be due. This is the 2018-2019 school year. I'm going to collect all these on your final exam day. So make sure you fill out the reference angle chart and your unit circle. The more familiar you are with this and where the angles go, it'll just help you be more efficient on the test. So I'm not going to go through this right now, but it is something you need to do. So let's look back at the front. If I have a formula, I'm going to use sine as my example, but this is true for cosine too. It should look like this. Okay. Notice the b is factored out. This is my amplitude. This is my number of cycles, 2 pi. This is my phase shift, and this is my vertical shift. So that just gives you a starting point for where all these things are coming from. Now notice we don't normally ask for the number of cycles, we ask for the period. And our formula for period is 2 pi over b. So it's just asking how long one cycle is, and we'll practice that in a second. So let's just start at number 1. My amplitude is 3. I noticed right away my 2 is not factored out. Remember, my b has to be factored out. So the first thing I'm going to do is rewrite this. To factor it out, I'm dividing by 2, right? So I'm cutting this in half, which means I also have to cut this in half. If I cut it in half, that's going to give me pi over 6. Now, if you needed to, I'll see if I can pull out a sticky note and show that work. Let's look at this real fast. Notice I said I have to divide by 2, so I have pi over 3 divided by 2. Well, I would think about this as 2 over 1. So if I'm dividing by 2, it's the same as multiplying by the reciprocal of this. That's where that pi over 6 came from. Okay, that's how I got pi over 6. Remember, period comes from this b term. This means that I have 2 full cycles in 2. So period's going to give me the length of 1 cycle. Well, my b term is 2, so if I simplify that, the length of 1 cycle will be pi. That makes sense because I should have 2 cycles in 2 pi. Each will have a length of pi. My phase shift is going to be pi over 6. Remember, after I factored it out, because it has a negative, that means it's going to the right. It's the opposite of what we expect because it's in the grouping symbols. It's in the parentheses or the brackets. Vertical shift will be up 12. Okay, amplitude's always positive, so the amplitude is 2, but we do want to make a note that this is going to be flipped if I had to graph it. I don't need to factor anything out here because this just has a coefficient of 1. So I'm just going to do 2 pi divided by 1, that's 2 pi. I didn't have to factor anything out, so my phase shift is pi over 2. Because this is positive, it means I'm going to be going to the left. There's no vertical shift. Okay, this time I have a leading coefficient of 1. My amplitude is 1. This one will also be flipped. I need to factor out this 3. Okay, so if I do that, I'm dividing by 3. I'm cutting this into thirds. If I do that, just like I did before, I'll end up with pi over 6. So that means I have 3 full cycles. So the length of 1 cycle will be a third of 2 pi. Well, if I can't simplify it at all, so my period is 2 pi over 3. My phase shift is going to be right because it's negative. It's the opposite of what we expect, pi over 6 and up 3. Remember, if you're in Mrs. Barnes's class, I want arrows. I don't want positives and negatives for any of these, so make sure you're showing me which direction these are going. Okay, again, this is going to be flipped, but it has an amplitude of 2. If this were a test and I asked for the amplitude, you wouldn't have to tell me that it was flipped. I just want to make a mental note now so that you guys are keeping that in your mind that when there's a negative, that means it's flipped. The period is going to be 2 pi divided by 5. It's already factored out, so the phase shift is going to be pi over 4, and the vertical shift will be up 3. Okay, let's see if we can write the equation for a trig function. It says using sine of x. It has, let's see if we can make a list. So A, B, C, I'll squeeze in D here, amplitude of 5, a period of 5. Well, let's think about this real fast. We know that period is equal to 2 pi over b, and they're telling me that the period is pi. Okay, well, if I multiply both sides by b, b has to be 2. Okay, there's a phase shift of pi over 6 to the left. It's going this direction. And it looks like there's no vertical shift anyways. So if I were to write this equation, it would be y equals 5, that's the amplitude, sine of x, oopsies, sine, b gets factored out. It's going to the left, so it's the opposite of what we would expect it to be negative, but it's actually going to be positive. And then there's no vertical shift. I'm going to pause the video now and I'll get back to the rest later, guys.